A little more of what we're talking about regarding the fact that man's unique contact from our ordinary position of a 3D existence, that ordinary from here, a contact with any other dimension would be singularly through this. That anything else at the ordinary somatic level cannot be expanded, cannot be changed, and there is nothing, in any way you look at it, if you can see it all, there is nothing that would make man unique from any other creature on this planet. This, and only this. And it gets misnamed for own reasons that you can figure out if I haven't hit it enough obliquely, of calling it a soul and a spirit and etc. And of course, very religious, crude people have always claimed that man had some sort of soul, and that was the direct contact between the gods. And it was the soul that made a man better than a raccoon. They were on the right track, as always, because you cannot get on the wrong track, if you remember, because there's only one turnaround station inside the Buick in which everyone is born. And that kind of merry-go-round that turns the trains around and the tracks, the idea that, well, I'm on the wrong track. No. But what they are reflecting is there is a uniqueness, but, forget soul and spirit and all that, unless you need it, and if you need it, you don't need to be here anyway. It is this. It's only that. It would be, if we were still talking that sort of symbolism, it would be the Rome itself of the old Roman Empire. It would be the seat of power from which everything else is expanding. And if you were going to grow yourself, taking this back to a three-dimensional picture right quick, you would get to the closest point of power. Although, must add, at the ordinary level, remember, it is apparently just the opposite, because the place to grow, the only place possible to grow, is out at the outer territories. You understand? That's the only place that can grow. But if you want to grow, it's just the opposite, except it's not exactly. Because if it's just the opposite, this would make sense. You got to go to the place to where it can't really grow. You got to be closer to where power emanates. Here. So, and we had also just hit the area last time that we were taping, if you recall, pointing out that, in fact, an operational definition that surely some of you can see of the human intellect, an operational definition, is the ability to conceive of time. And you should not overlook, you should not undervalue the importance of being able to think about this, to remember it, and to try and see not only the 3D existence being a simplified, a simpler series of aftershocks from unknown six-dimensional operations, but also to see that time itself operationally could be listed as a synonym, not with ordinary people, of course, but a synonym for the intellect. Because were it not for the intellect, there'd be no sense of time, and as I'm going to try to get some of you to see, from one particular view, if it were not for needing a sense of time, there would be no intellect. Now, I know the intellect can do all sorts of neat things, work crossword puzzles, send dirty letters anonymously to the IRS, but the job of the intellect is the conception of time. How about let's just jump in with both feet? If the conception of time were not so important, there would be no intellect. And you can see from a certain kind of subversive view that were it not for a sense of time, there would be no awareness. Jump in with one foot, and then I'll make it both in a minute. There would be no awareness, no idea, no notion whatsoever, no question of whether things are progressing or regressing, whether things are getting better or worse. Now, some ordinary intellect might say, well, that's not exactly the same thing as time. And I would have to say, or if little Richard was here, he could say, shut up. Because it is the same thing as time. Not at the ordinary level, of course, because in the same way that the ordinary level, they could not accept, they could not digest me saying that the human intellect is operationally synonymous with time. The idea of progress, let's take progress. Things getting better, now let's do something worthwhile. Things getting worse is operationally the same, is synonymous with time. How could things get worse if there was no sense of time? How could things get better for those few people every now and then that life makes them just unavoidably because of the heat and too much to drink go, I'm inexplicably optimistic. And life says, shut up. And of course, snaps people back to their senses. The intellect and its conception of time is, from a non-street level, it is functional evidence of life's continuing growth. Try that. The sense of time, the concept of time, which I assume everyone can easily see, as far as a three-dimensional kingdom, man is the only one that has a sense of time. We've already gone through a few pictures of dogs and etc. They can teach some animals, apparently they can affect their motor skills. They can affect the 3D operation spatially of a baboon or a chimpanzee doing something. And they could even get a chimpanzee, they can take hands on a big old clock, I guess. And when they get the red one, the hour hand pointed to 3, they can teach a chimpanzee to go mash a button, and then I guess the psychologist could say, ha ha, he knows when it's 3 o'clock. No creature in the three-dimensional world, three-dimensional domain, has any concept of time. Just forget it. Seriously, if you can't see that, go ahead and study it on it yourself. There is no conception of time without the intellect. It is, if you needed it, it is a functional piece of evidence that life is growing. Now let's try both feet. If life was not growing, there would be no need for a sense of tomorrow. I rest my case. As you know, we are not want to go into ideas of proof and etc. because none of this can be proven. And there's no insistence that this is true, because it's not true. Three-dimensionally, it's not true. None of this is true. It is just more complexly correct if you can see beyond, if you have any potential to see beyond the 3 dimensions of space, of our existence. So it's not proof, but for now, bear with me to use things like evidence. But if you had any question, if you're sitting around there talking to your own old street-level partner intelligence, and it says, well, sometimes we get tricked and bamboozled with these meetings, and I almost, again, myself, almost inexplicably get optimistic. I'll walk outside and almost begin to whistle and look up, and then I snap back and I think, oh, no. Life, no. There's too much evidence. The weight of all evidence is that things are running down. Certain ideas in physics, certain very obscure ideas in mathematics, which is yet to come to light. There's some people that mathematically believe that life is running downhill. I can't go into it now. Hopefully you'll be spared. I think that the thought police are after them now. But if you needed some sort of evidence, it is so neat again, if you can hear it. The evidence would begin with things are not going downhill. Let's try it this way. I'll play a little bit of, I almost called it logic. The question before this body, is life going to proceed a tempo or even better? Is life going to go uphill? Will it modulate from a B flat to a B natural? Or is it going from a B flat to a B flat minor, then down to an A, and then the whole piano fall apart? Is life going up or down? That's the question. Then I would say, well, wait a minute. If you could listen. If life is going downhill, okay, I mean, it's just a matter, it's just going to be all over, you know, then there is no tomorrow. Okay. I mean, there might be tomorrow, maybe another couple of weeks or something, but no, there is no real tomorrow. All we're doing now is we're hanging around. They're turning down the house lights. They're boarding up the doors. Somebody's already setting fire to the theater, and there's no way out. I mean, so you're just hanging around killing time, right? So there is no tomorrow. Okay, I really feel that way. If there's no tomorrow, then there would be no need whatsoever for a concept of time. Looked at another way, I was going to say, sort of laughingly, the idea of any evidence would be that if life is not charging full ahead, and you got to remember, the picture, the map that I insist to you is very useful, even if you feel as though that you don't fully grasp it, or you can't really believe it all, or you can't see it all. What seems to be the future here, and I assume I'm not stepping into any kind of, I shouldn't assume that, any kind of science fiction story, since I don't know, but it's not a story. Probably somebody's picked this up somewhere. At its simplest describable level, the idea of a future here cannot be predicted because of what we've already described. It is a kind of aftershock, series of aftershocks, of unknown six-dimensional operations. So the thing is, what seems to be the future here, it can't be predicted here, unless an Apple's going to say, well, my prediction is that we're all going to fall down and rot. A big prediction. It cannot be predicted, and yet what seems to be the future from this level is not actually the future, because if you can see this right quick, it's not that. Since this is a series of aftershocks, you're not being absolutely invalid to say that the three-dimensional future has already happened to a degree because of what is going on in six dimensions. Not exactly, but that's not the point. Do you hear that in a sense the future here has already happened? It's not totally unknown. It is not as though you're going to divide up the old three-dimensional idea that philosophers tried to wrestle with, that time is like a line, let's say. And the past is over here, reading from your left to right. And those of you who want to do this in the Oriental or the Yiddish way, you can read it that way. Or you can read it that way. Reading from left to right, and that's the past, and over here is the future. And it's this infinite line going on all the time, and then now is right now. Some kind of little line, it's chopping up, and right now is a constant, infinite series of the little bitty presents. Not gifts, presences. And from that view, you say, well, nobody knows what's going to happen over here, because it is yet to happen. It's down at this end of the line. We're moving into the future continually, like into a dark tunnel. We're just going through and we don't know what's going to happen. Now, that is valid enough at the three-dimensional level. People that think that way, there's nothing else to say. That's just a hobby, it's philosophy, and there's no way to say that that's not true, because it's not true and it's not true. But to say that down in this tunnel, or going off in that line that's infinite, and there's no idea what happened, that's not true. Because what is going to, very crudely, what's going to affect, what's going to cause, what's going to happen down here, has already happened in six dimensions. Not specifically enough to talk about, and if it was, we wouldn't talk about it if somebody knew, because it's no importance. Unless you're a gambler, of course. But the future is not some unknown. The three-dimensional future, in the same way that I could say that three-dimensional time is not really much of a definition of time. And then if an ordinary intellect say, well, do better, I can't. I mean, there's nothing I can say that you would hear any better than that. But the idea of time, that seems to be just, you talk about time, we've wrapped it up. In the same way that you can say, well, the three dimensions spatially, we can talk about height. I know what height is. What are you going to add to it? That's like, what can I tell you? You mean there's some secret going on in height that we don't know about? Where's it going to hide? This is height. All right, yeah, but what's the mystical significance? I don't know. This is height. In the same way, people can dream about, well, time is a mysterious thing. At the three-dimensional level, the intelligence work in time has been wrapped up. What the three-dimensional mind can think about now about time, that's it. So there's no secret. There's nothing hidden except for this. In the same way that three-dimensional life, existence, is not a full example of what's driving it. In other words, the three-dimensional world is not driving itself. Its idea of time is incomplete. And so to say that, well, time isn't something solid And the future has yet to be realized, which is why it's the future. It's the definition itself. It's not. The future is not absolutely unknown. It's just unpredictable at this level. Now back to where we were. If you can see that then, why would life have placed at this level, or any level, but I assume that since most of you live at this level, that's the one that would interest you. Well, knowing the egocentric bastards most of you are, yeah. There would be no sense of time. This was my laughingly threaded kind of logic. Life is going to grow at this territory, man. So it expands the nervous system past the point of a minx or a beaver. And so man starts this cerebral cortex begins to operate in what we call the intellect. And the thing, you can come up with all sorts of other things, engineering feats, technology, and all that stuff, but the singularity, because beavers build dams, they just don't. And they never got sharp enough to charge a toll when you drive over it. The one thing that you can find nothing comparable, such as me, that wasn't just a joke. Because the other things that the intellect does, you can find, in a sense, comparable aspects in the spatial world. But nowhere will you find anything resembling the concept of time. So why would life have gone to this trouble? Pick out one creature down at the three-dimensional level, over in this part of the universe, and it runs the nervous system up, sends out more and more energy, and it develops this, and its singularity is to conceive of time. Why would it do all that unless it was going to be of some value? And what is the value of time? Well, to know tomorrow, besides the repackaging and the reuse of energy by thinking about the past. We've been through that enough, but let's now try the other apparent three-dimensional direction. If there is no tomorrow, why would life go to all this trouble to make man think, to have an intellect, and the intellect's singularity is in the conception of time, if it's not going to go anywhere? Thus, another operational synonym to even complicate the stew is having a concept of time is functionally synonymous with tomorrow. It is. You don't need any proof. You don't need to let life scare you if you saw it anymore that, I read some dire predictions in the Bhagavad Gita, the Old Testament, or I was looking up Jimmy Swaggart's horoscope and things don't look good. As long as man conceives of time, trust me, figuratively speaking, things are going quite well. If suddenly people, pretty suddenly, begin to have no sense of time, look out. Look out. Now, does that sound, those of you that followed it, if I didn't make it too sticky, does that sound crude enough as an understatement? Silly, ridiculous. Who in the world, what kind of refugee from an insane asylum for kindergartners would think up such a thing? That just having a concept of time is some kind of, you're saying it's synonymous or even evidence that there will be some time coming up? Well, when you put it that way, no, I'm not going to say that. Of course I would, but I was playing an ordinary person's part. I'm not going to make an ordinary person think that I'm not dumb. It is a kind of evidence, and I'm not saying it to make you feel good, because there's another use for this. It's to see that the intellect operating itself of all the great things it can do, all the things that you must do, apparently live in the city, such as filing your income tax, being able to fill out forms, or the enjoyment you have of reading or writing. You could look at all that as almost as what life has done, making sex so much fun at the primary level, so that people that say they don't want kids, especially men, a whole lot of them end up with kids anyway. Where'd you come from? You make me just smile like So it's like making sex so much fun that even people that don't want kids end up many times, as some of you know, with kids. Where the hell that come from? It was so much fun, you just couldn't resist. It's just like, paying the toll. It's almost as though then life has made the intellect have so many apparent possible hobbies of literature, art, music, just thinking, daydreaming, all of that, suffering, worrying about the past. It's like all of that It's the same way making sex fun, so that you'll go ahead and screw and produce offspring, that the offspring of this is a continual, which is a form of continuity, of time. It is the three dimensions tie to the fourth dimension. It is the trickle-down theory, forget kind of blindside Reagan economics and all those ideas. It is the trickle-down of energy from the fourth dimension to the third, but instead of it having some kind of Eschner drawing or something that cannot actually be done, the energy is running and dripping over an edge that cannot be described spatially because it's outside of space, but it's dripping over, and where it's dripping is right here. And it will not drip without a concept of time. Because if there is no concept of time, we would not be tied to the fourth dimension, because the future would not exist. Because compared to us, the fourth dimension is the future. And there's what I'm saying is evidence. Not to make you feel good or to prove a point, but there is the evidence that the future is there, or you couldn't think about time. It would just go away. It would not be a theory. You'd never think about it. That was a lot for not to be any evidence. You could say, all in all, that an intellectual operational dictionary, which of course there is no such thing, that inside such a dictionary, just having a concept of time, which is specifically of tomorrow. If you took out tomorrow, nobody would think about time. Even if in some way we could actually cut off memory and chop it up that way with a normal person. I'm not talking about some sort of routine brain damage, but if we could just take out the sense of the future, and I could tell you in some intellect, all right, you can think about now and the past, nobody'd bother. I'm certainly not going to stop with that one and try anymore. But I just, again, figuratively, funny speaking, trust me and just listen to the rest of, I was going to wrap up a piece of that. If there was such a thing as a revolutionist dictionary, the operational definition of time would be tomorrow. That is one step of time. But to expand it a little bit more, after that, the greater definition of time in there, of just in the intellect inside of a revolutionist dictionary, there being the definition of time and it being tomorrow, would be assurance that there will be one. But you got to admit, those kind of dictionaries don't exist. Nobody likes that one? Yeah. Well, what would it be about an ordinary level? What if you could look up the word like joy and it made you feel better? Or you were hungry and you had no money, but you had a dictionary and you could look up food and you went, huh? That is what a revolutionist dictionary would be. Of course, it's not out there. It's in here, being able to think right up to the edge of where the energy is running from one level to another. That's when these definitions that cannot be true, that you cannot define, much less you cannot consider it part of a synonym thesaurus of saying time, a concept of time, is synonymous with the intellect. It's not. Or make it as sticky as you want to. A concept of time, a noun, is synonymous with thinking, a verb. But it is. And remember what we were trying to impossibly describe as an operational definition would be that something exists only because life needs it to function in a certain way. That's the real definition. The definition of the dictionary is fine. That's a hobby. It's part of the pleasure of intellectual sex. But the definitions in the dictionary are not the operational definitions, even if they were to coincide verbally with something we might describe. The operational definition, once you get past the hobby stage, whatever life is doing is what life needs to be done. And that's the definition. That is and then any synonym you can compare apples and verbs, you can compare beavers and pronouns. It doesn't matter. Because the operational definition or an operational synonym, it doesn't matter whether one thing appears to be a verb, one thing appears to be a noun. Whatever life needs is synonymous with whatever you can describe it as being, as doing. And the existence of the intellect, the importance of the intellect, the mere presence of the intellect is synonymous with a concept of time. If that's too sticky, it's synonymous with time. See, it's even worse. And all of that's synonymous with tomorrow. Yeah, it is. No, can't be. I mean, it might be some kind of connection. There's no such thing as a connection without them being synonymous. It's only at the street level that people say, well, that might be connected. And all that is, that's part of believing that, yes, I'm sitting here in the great human drama, even my own drama internally of thinking. It goes on with this continuing series of different acts. It appears to be that way. That is the basis of conclusion-oriented thinking. That is episodic consciousness. That one thing is connected to another. And at the street level, people believe, well, I'm getting more intelligent. Because, I'm beginning now, perhaps I'm starting off metaphorically, but I suspect it may even get better, that I believe that the sociological impact of mass hysteria is in some way connected with the same kinds of forces that might make men desire to be religious. Whatever the hell that meant. And there appears to be some connection. In the city, everything is connected. It's just some people see that this is connected to that, and somebody else says, no, that's connected to that. If they are truly connected, they are operationally synonymous. That's why, at the secondary intellectual level, as people will say, wait a minute, they are connected. At a greater level, to be, in a dramatic sense, sarcastic and smart-ass, to say that they're connected, they're the same thing. That's the only reason that ordinary consciousness and intelligence thinks they're connected, is they're the same thing. And at the three-dimensional level, it can't be, because for one thing, two things cannot, above the subparticle level that they don't want to talk about a lot, two things cannot occupy the same what? Pew, not space. And so you cannot say, you can say in some way symbolically that, well, time, or a concept of time, might be some integral part of the thinking process. Now they're the same thing. Now if they're the same thing, that means they're interchangeable. They could be in the same place, the same thing. That's right. And that's not true. But then if you remember that the three-dimensional existence of everything, including ideas, are aftershocks of unknown six-dimensional operations, then you have got to, if you followed into that, you have got to look at yourself and realize that you are a poster boy for your city intelligence. To say, well, it's impossible for two things to be the same, not just synonymous, to be the same. It may be here, but from a more complex view, to say, well, that cannot be, that two things cannot occupy the same space, they cannot be the same thing, wrong-o. I know I shouldn't speak in foreign languages, but those of you who know it, help the others. It's El Fo'o. Inasmuch, let's go back to something I assume that's fairly easy to picture, metaphorically, for those of you still bring your lunch to school with graham crackers and milk, and your mother's pinned your name to your drawers. But for you, let's go back. You should be able to see, because even ordinary people have used this kind of thing, as I was pointing out in the past. People, in the religious sense, have said that humanity was tied to the gods through their soul, through their spirit. There was like an invisible beam or some great invisible spiritual cord. All right. Here is where you are tied the closest to the center of power. It is here, only here, no matter what else you do, insofar as there being any possibility that you're in some way connected to what your forefathers would think of as God and great cosmic forces. It's here, right there, literally, at the brain level. As much as we can say three-dimensionally. That if we do the old Phillips screwdriver and up your nose and do a frontal lobotomy over you, you're not in touch with Rome. Forget it. You can't be religious. You couldn't even then go back and think, well, since I now cannot think like I used to, I guess, and I'm getting old, I'll go be religious. You couldn't even be religious. Once you stop the operations here at the cerebral cortex, nothing. I mean, you got the same chance at salvation, paradise, extreme expansion of consciousness. You've got, Because I don't make you feel bad in case something has happened. But you are on the same footing then as our friends the beavers and titwillows. You got the same chance. It is quite simply that you are tied. There's one place that you are tied to, possibly. Everybody is. It's the one place that you're being fed singularly. It's the one place, going back to three-dimensional life being like an empire, the Roman Empire, any empire. The only way it can grow, I mean, everybody can see this, it's out at the outer extremities. It has got to push the frontiers of its kingdom, its empire, further and further, three-dimensionally. In that same way, it is here. Man's the only creature that is growing, other than physically, which makes no difference. It changes nothing except in the spatial world. So it's here. It's as though you could say that the Huns never get any closer to Rome than through their neural emissaries. Doesn't do any good physically. I know the Huns and the Visigoths and even some bass players all got together, there for about 50 years, almost everybody and his brother sacked Rome. I mean, it got to the point that a bunch of people would show up with some sharp sticks and Rome would holler, all right, we give. But at any rate, see, that's all spatial. That's all spatial. You can overrun anybody. You overrun Rome, but notice, those of you who have never noticed, that Rome everybody just kicked ass around, just sacked Rome. Rome get up, somebody sack him again. It's like, boy, the Roman Empire life took care of that. But remember the dance. Somebody dances forward and somebody dances backward. The idea that Rome got sacked forever, those of you that just read history at a three-dimensional level, may I point out to you the continuing existence of an operation, I think it's known as the Roman Catholic Church. Just in case you think that Rome has been dancing backwards ever since 451 or whenever. That had nothing to do with the church, of course. But the Huns, the outlying territories, can never get closer, except spatially, which is of no consequence, can never get closer than through their neural connection. A man, any man, can never get closer to what he has always been driven to call the gods or cosmic forces. He can never get closer. He can get on his knees, he can light candles, he can do sacrifices, but he never gets any closer than what? Don't say what. All right, what? It's better you say where. All right, where? There. In you. It is the spot. It is the only possible spot with you and anybody else. It's the only possible spot that you can grow, other than doing deep knee bends and get your thighs the size of ham hocks. But the only place you're going to grow outside of space, the only place that you might scratch where you might subversively itch, is here. Once you see that, then might I add, since I know that you would very shortly after, that you are tied to the future. Humanity is. Humanity, the middle of the bourgeoisie neighborhoods and all the cities at all times, the humanity is tied to the future here. Being tied to the future, that being the only possibility of any real, in any sense, change or growth, then it should be the intellect, then not with ordinary people necessarily. Life looks after its own. It's that a few rebels almost have to help look after themselves. And so with a few who begin to understand it, it is the intellect, is the facility, the faculty, that above all, that you should cherish, use, and protect, because it is the only connection. You got no connection on your knees. That's for the city. You got no connection with prayers. You got no connection with doing good deeds. You got no connection with suffering, being full of self-pity and crying every time the sun comes up and then crying every time the sun goes down. All that's fine in the city. But there is only one thing that ties you to any possibility of something else. And the something else always is in tomorrow. That is, it's always around the corner of the three-dimensional world. And it's this. No heart, no soul, no muscles, no good deeds, no charitable works, no success in life, no nothing. It's this. There is nothing else. There is no place that you're tied that would single you and humanity out from. As much as I love them, and you too, I'm sure, the brown bear, well, even the grizzly. It is this and this alone. Once you understand that, would you not, that's why I said I'm sure that you would have come up with the same caution to yourself, directive. This among all, not that in your CD collection, but this among all, you should cherish, you should use, and you should protect. It is your own. You can see it as your own kind of Roman Empire. The seat of power, if it goes, everything's gone. And when the Visigoths wanted to bring down the Roman Empire, any empire, did they go out to the edges? They had to come through the edges. They kicked a little ass along the way. But you can go out there and you can kill off the territories. You can go overrun England. You can go overrun the Danube, Gaul, everywhere else. But you have not brought down the empire. You have got to go and attack the seat of power. That's the only way to bring it down. Conversely, what among all things would anybody who might aspire to expanding themselves, what would they protect? Among all things. It's all right to try and be healthy. I mean, if you don't like all that cholesterol, give it to somebody else. Or if you're tired of being a 98-pound weakling, go work out and become a 100-pound weakling. Who cares? But if you're going to aspire to do anything, this is your one chance, because it is here that you are tied to change. Because as you all know, you've got your own dictionary now that we've been talking. The synonym for change is what? Tomorrow. You knew that. If there is no tomorrow, you're not going to change. What's the synonym for growth? Wait, this is a trick question, right? I bet you're going to say the same thing. There is no tomorrow if Rome falls. Not in any way outside a spatial sense. Why would you not protect this? You can protect your health. You can protect your car. You can protect your record collection. But this is what you should protect. This is what you should find great pleasure in. I know many people in the city do, but I'm just saying now, outside that, the three-dimensional needs of ordinary people being either polarized as being happy or not happy at any particular time. Once you realize it, that should be the absolute joy. And it should be that a person uses, and it should be that a person protects. Because that is your one connection. It's everyone's connection. It's just at city level it doesn't matter much because life is growing at its own pace. But the pace here, you understand it, it's 5 and 6 dimensions, let's say. This is not comparable, and there's no way to do it. But what if I said that, all right, the way things move here, if we call the tempo of life, which is tied, of course, in one sense, if you're going to get really crude, to the senses. Most people, and I guess the basic would be the light, is we appear to move at a certain tempo. We can move faster, you can move slower, but there is a tempo. Let's call it X. At 6 dimensions, would you just assume that's not the same tempo? Would you then assume that an idea that tomorrow is synonymous with intellect, that tomorrow is synonymous with change, has to do with the speed? Because at the three-dimensional level, an apple cannot move, cannot breathe, cannot see, cannot think faster than the prevailing light waves, all that is essentially available inside the orchard. It cannot. Even its daydreams, even human daydreams, great daydreams of people have an IQ even above 3 figures. Their imagination, as we were talking about last time, their imagination still runs up to the limits of the three-dimensional senses. The furthest reaches in the city at any given time, the speculations on the great possibilities tomorrow of the human intellect, they don't describe anything except this without knowing it. What they're describing is, here is the wall of today's intellect. Even when they say, yeah, but you're not listening. I'm saying that tomorrow, or as they used to say, God is not limited to our kind of limitations. That's why he's God. Well, tell me about him. And what do they say? The only thing they say is, well, he's way off in the orchard. He's way down there. Yeah, but he's not limited like us. Well, tell me how. Well, you know how, all right, you know how we, all right, we have a sense of living in time, right? Well, he doesn't. So that explains it, eh? That was too fast. It's all descriptions of intelligence at the three-dimensional level are synonymous. They're operational synonyms for human stupidity. Of course, I mean that very crudely. I was trying to get you to see. Another way, stand in the city, ordinary intelligence, and it's going to point to infinity. Where will it point? Without knowing it. It'll point to the city limit signs. Oh, they'll say this. If you tried to question it, and ordinary intelligence could follow in this, it'd say, no, I'm not pointing at the sign. I'm pointing beyond it. And then if I tried to say, all right, now point beyond it without using the sign, you can't do it. And so it says, no, it's right past that. What? That sign? Now, what are you pointing at? I'm pointing at the full potential of tomorrow. The full expansion, the realization of all human intellect. Or God. I'm talking about the full, unlimited power of God. All right, point to it. Where you point? Can you see? What? It's right past the city limit sign. You didn't hear it? It says it's pointing somewhere else, but it's not. Because all I can do is point to that sign and say, nah, I'm pointing right past it. Well, tell me about it. Well, I just told you. God doesn't live here. God lives beyond that. Well, tell me more. What the hell you mean? I just told you he lives outside the city. There is no tomorrow. If you have destroyed, if you did not protect where you are tied to the seat of power, there is no idea, there is no operational realization to any idea that you could change. Not physically, not lose weight or put on weight, but that you could grow, as they used to like to say, that you could expand your consciousness without having to resort to Upjohn or any of his minions coming across the border. If you're going to do this, it cannot occur unless there is the future. And the future does not exist three-dimensionally. That's why it cannot be predicted. That's why it cannot be described. And it's part of the beautiful arrangement that if at the ordinary level you stay involved with trying to predict, or other people's predictions, or a feeling at street level that things are going downhill, things are going uphill, you are, in a sense, muffling, strangling off the neural emissaries, the neural lines that you may, right now, assuming you're at one of the outlying territories, you're one of the Visigoths wishing to get closer to Rome. If you take the kind of information that is prevailing throughout the empire that, well, things are looking down, Rome's getting shaky, I'm not sure the information we're getting from the Home Office is all that valid. If you stay with that, it is going to strangle the possibility. It begins to cut down the possibility that you can contact or get some communication more directly from Rome, from the fourth dimension, from time, that where the aftershocks are seeping down from 6 dimensions here, if you stay involved with what seems to be going on here, it's a form of self-hypnosis, form of suicide. It's a form of reaching up here. If there was some kind of neural umbilical cord tying you, or a pipeline, into time around the corner, it's like you're trying to cut down, while at the same time the beautiful arrangement is you might appear to be, very likely appear to be, a city thinker. That you might be staying there going, I'm not one for foolish, childish optimism. I'm a man who faces the facts. And you're tearing down the thing. You can be saying, in fact, I have credentials. I am known as a futurist. I am known as a predictor. I have 14 degrees. Now, no one can absolutely predict the future, but I can certainly, for certain, tell you people a few things. In the three-dimensional world, I assume you know, you're turning the knob to the right as fast as you can. You're cutting off any possibility. That's why it is safe to say that those in the city who actually seriously predict things, if they knew what they were predicting, they wouldn't be predicting anything, if they knew what was involved. And it's not just literally, of course, predicting. It's not that simply if you do go ahead and take that job, you're offered to be the astrologer on the weekly paper. It's not that. It's for you to operating at street level and believing that what is the information available three-dimensionally about the future, about time, that is in fact is some kind of information actually coming from the home office, from Rome, you're done for. Insofar as ever being able to pull your attention, to be able to pull your intelligence or to feed it more directly outside the limits of the orchard, of the Buick, of the three dimensions. One little thing to go life at you again at the ordinary level. As everyone knows about life out there, and those of you who are complex enough, you know about life in here inside of your own empire. There are not only parts of each empire that get almost irresistibly caught up into whatever the faddish thought, word, phrase, theories, ideas are, and then there are parts of the empire always, if they're faddish enough to be recognized as a fad, then there are other parts of everyone's empire, the empire of life, the empire of the person, that condemn it. What is the faddish word of people now talking about need my space, or whatever it is. And it is parts of life always, in some region of the empire, will always be condemning and criticizing some other area of the empire who seem to get taken up by these faddish thoughts in some popular phrase, and people say it like they know what the hell they're talking about, according to, from one view, tut tut, tut tut. If for nothing else, it is a healthy sign because it shows that even the most, it is a kind of continuing evidence that even the most routine, the most bland, the most mundane, the most pedestrian of intellects can at least have some passing, teeny-weeny little bit taste of intellectual expansion, which is why it becomes faddish. It's why suddenly that everybody and his brother living in Southern California, a hotbed, that suddenly you have all these people on TV or out in bars, and it's suddenly all of these, this is from one view of the empire. People, one group looks at the other part of life's body, the empire, and go, that is the kind of pretension to intelligence that inflames real thinkers like me and my brother and my friends. Is these people that suddenly there'll be some term come out about, for a while it was shortfall. Start out the bureaucrats in Washington with the Fed board or somewhere, they'd talk about there's going to be an economic shortfall. And some part of life's empire will go, what you're saying is you're going to come up short. What you're going to say is you don't have enough money. What you're going to say is we're not getting enough taxes. What the hell is this kind of gobbledygook that comes out of the bureaucracies about we may experience a shortfall? It's almost like you're trying to take, they're going to say, hey, they're going to dump manure on us. And you're going to say, and then suddenly you hear it everywhere. Then it becomes part of, for a month, 2 months, or whatever. Then it's no longer just economics or wherever it started. There are people talking about, hi, I'm a Sagittarius. I don't come here very often. Well, if we do go do it, will this be just a one-night affair, or could we be committed up to a couple of weeks or something? And the guy says, 2 more over here. Well, darling, I've got to tell you this. You already appeal to me, and I feel that this could be more than just a couple hours or a few minutes back in the alley. But I'm gonna have to tell you, being the Sagittarius I got to tell you, I seem to be experiencing of late a kind of emotional shortfall. So it spreads down to that level. But notice, every time it happens, there's a group somewhere, and all of you should have some taste of this, that there's a part of life's body, life's own empire up here, that laughs, scoffs, criticizes, condemns that. It's nothing new. It's not Southern California run a berserk verbally. It's always been going on. And it's not just words. We don't have the time, I'm not going into it. It's theories, ideas, whole paradigms religiously, socially, that are faddish. Some of them last more than 2 weeks. Some of them last 200 or 300 years. Some of them last longer than that, which I don't want to scare you. But all they are, in a sense, are fads. But rather than saying, well, that's stupidity or that's pretension, that's an excuse for not thinking. No. Think back. At the ordinary level, back where you can be anytime you want to. You know right where it is, how to get back to street level. You can go back to the neighborhood. Everybody is homey. You can go right back there, and the faddish thoughts, the ideas, the words are just the easiest one to pull out for you. But they're faddish thoughts, whole theories, socially, religiously. It is a sign of health, because you could stand there right quick, even though you know that's not the subversive, revolutionist, trans three-dimensional, profitable position. But you could take that position to try and see it, to criticize and say, well, the people staying around, we're floating above this bar. We're at the edge of the fourth dimension. We're seeing people. In a sense, they're talking as mechanically they might as well be, literally, staying there above poor old Jim Henson and his cohorts, and it's just the hands up everybody's back, and it's people, and they're just talking in cliches, but it's not just the words. But you could be there if you're floating around and say, well, now that's the kind of crap that passes for intelligence. And all they're doing, it is nothing but cliche-ridden thoughts. That's just some kind of, they're now making impact into a noun, an adverb, a drink. And I need my space. And I'm the shortfall of being too involved emotionally. And you could be floating there from part of life's body and say, that is just idiocy. That's just sickening. That has nothing to do with intelligence, creativity, originality of thought. Nay, one more time. Tick-tock. It is a sign of health. Because at the very least, at the ordinary level, it's like everybody gets one shot, even periodically. But at least people get one shot, because it's this little teeny feeling that they suddenly hear this new term of a shortfall in personal relationships. And they get some idea of what it meant, and they love to go out and say it. That's why you can look from one view that you think, well, I'm being a critic because I'm more intelligent. But that's part of the charm. That's the glow on their face of saying, I've been experiencing a shortfall in my personal relations. And maybe the person never heard it used that way. And as far as they're concerned, they took this idea, the shortfall they kept hearing. Brand new word. They don't ever read. They don't ever really think. And they just pick this up from TV. They hear it in another bar. Somebody's talking about shortfall. And they get some idea what it is. And then if you're floating around being that kind of smart-ass three-dimensional critic, then you can say, look how pretentious, because then they suddenly, like, they thought about it, or it was some brilliant insight, and they say, well, a Sagittarius is now leaving the me decade and going into the us 90s. Some of us are beginning to actually have to face up, to confront our own emotional shortfalls. And you could be going, that ain't, what a bunch of mechanical, that means nothing. You're wrong. It's a sign of health. Look at people's face. Look at you when you used to do it. We'll assume, I put it in the past. Because it is just a teeny-weeny, little bitty piece of experience of new thought, an expansive intellect. It's like the Huns living out there, and they've been stationed right there at the border of where now is, sad to say, Yugoslavia and Albania. And you're given your job, and your Buick stops there, and that's it. You're supposed to stay there. And it's like nobody looked. And one day, you've been stationed there to guard that part of the empire, and one day nobody's looking, and you go, emotional shortfall. It's like you stepped over a line that you were supposed to stay there in your position. It's like nobody was looking, and that's the great fun. But notice, that is about the extent of ordinary people's ordinary growth, their enjoyment of saying that you should cherish the intellect. That's about the most that any ordinary person could do. They'd say, I do. I really do. I love to read the National Enquirer. No offense to that, but that is not feeding the intellect. That is not opening up and making use of the intellect. And then you can say, well, I do more than that. And they would never get around to saying this, but what they do operationally is they would say, I do pick up on new ideas. And of course, all they're saying is they pick up on new words. They pick up on new sounds representing the energy of ideas. That's why words, ideas, do become faddish. But that is their enjoyment. That's the extent of their use of, their pleasure in, their protection of this connection. Nothing wrong with it. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's all that life needs. But once you understand that this connection, there is no growth, there is no possibility of growth without tomorrow. There is no tomorrow without a sense of time. There is no sense of time without the intellect. If you want to run this back in that kind of very subversive, three-dimensional track, then without a sense of time, there is no man. There is nothing to say. There is nothing to protect. There is nothing to use. I got 2 minutes to straighten out. Whatever it is, 53 minutes. And as several of you told me before we started, this is so simple and right to the point that, a couple of you said, well, there's no doubt this is going to be smooth sailing tonight. Let me try repetition. That always works. But it works for life. Don't undervalue just thinking about the fact of the importance of time, not at the ordinary level, and not of time itself as it's described, of saying, yes, I got to conserve my time. It doesn't matter whether you conserve your time at the ordinary level. Remember, it all costs the same in the end. To stand around in line waiting to get cut down, to waiting to go to that big arbitrage in the sky, or it's over the hill. To wait on that, it doesn't matter whether you waste time, save time, where are you going to put it? Time like that's not what we're talking about. Time is the reality that any change is possible. And it's not the time that people talk about. It's this thing operating. That is what people have always dreamed of some connection with the gods, or if I could make my soul open up to the gods, or if I could meet a priest somewhere that in some way he's connected with gods, and I'll hold on to his ankles, and I'll get in his underwear with him, and I'll live with him. Here's the connection, it's right there. It's nowhere else. And it is exactly tied to time, not the three-dimensional time, because time is where 3 dimensions turn around the edge of the orchard. It is why that ordinary people now say, all the way from Einsteins to would-be Einsteins to Hollywood movies, that time is the 4th dimension. There is a reality to it. That's the only reason that people say that. It is tomorrow. And don't say, well, yeah, tomorrow exists in time. No. Time is tomorrow. Time, as man calls it, is comparable to the next dimension. It is the future, and it's already there. If you cannot take your own mind there, there is no tomorrow. There is no future. There is no question of change. Bye.